Hi there, Greg Van Beek. This is Nancy O'Dell, and I wanted to say congratulations on 500 episodes of Nostalgia Radio Time. That is awesome. And you're also celebrating 10 years. I mean, that's quite the anniversary. Very impressive, Greg. I love me some oldies but goodies.
Once I had a secret love. I'm Lori Morgan, and if you love pop standards as much as I do, you'll want to tune in each week to Nostalgia Radio Time, hosted by my friend Greg Van Beek.
Go, Joe, go!
Hi everyone, this is Katie Couric, and I want to welcome you to one of my favorite programs, Nostalgia Radio Time, hosted by my friend Greg Van Beek.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to program number 717 of Nostalgia Radio Time. Joining us today on the program is our friend TCM host Alicia Malone, who, for the second time this year, has a new publication that bears her name, and of which I'm very much looking forward to talking with her about. So welcome back to the program, Alicia.
Hi, Greg. Thank you for having me on again. It's fun to talk to you twice in 1 year.
Yes. When we last spoke back in May, we talked about your, I guess, still relatively new book, TCM Imports, Timeless Favorites and Hidden Gems of World Cinema. How's that book been doing for you?
That's been really good. What's been nice to hear is from viewers who haven't seen a lot of the films in the book, viewers who might be more familiar with Hollywood classic films but haven't yet delved into the world of international movies. And that's what I find the most fun, is when someone says to me, I've never seen this movie before, but I'm excited to try it. So that makes me happy.
And I would imagine it's been getting some very favorable reaction from everyone who's read it, because it is such a well-written and high-quality publication.
Oh, thank you. I mean, they do such a good job at running press with our TCM library, and it was really fun to put together. So I'm glad that people are enjoying it.
And the same thing can be said for your current release, titled Film Fashion Icons, which is totally different from your previous 4 books in that it's not a book per se, but rather a guidebook and a fantastic deck of cards featuring stars from the golden age of Hollywood style.
Yeah, that's right, and it's hard to describe to people because it is, as you say, a deck of cards along with a guidebook. It's something that I think would make a good gift at Christmas time or just to have around the house. It's basically 40 different stars who I consider fashion icons of Hollywood's golden age, and on the deck of cards you have a picture of each of them, and then in the guidebook I go into more detail about what made them fashion stars.
Was this inspired by the TCM series you hosted on Hollywood Fashion titled Follow the Thread, which I loved, by the way, or who came up with the idea for this project?
Thank you. Well, Running Press approached me with this idea, and I think it was inspired of After Follow the Thread on TCM, because that was quite a popular series and it was really fun for me to do. And we'd actually talked about the possibility of me writing an entire book on fashion, but I said, I don't think I'm that much of an expert in fashion. I certainly enjoy it, and I certainly love watching the stars of classic cinema in their beautiful costumes, but I'm definitely by no means an expert in fashion. So they approached me with this idea, which was a much shorter writing project, and something that I thought could be really fun to look at, especially with the angle of what kind of inspiration can we take from the classic film stars from the past. And that's something I notice anytime I go on a website like Pinterest. You see a lot of people still looking at pictures of Grace Kelly and Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant, and you notice how their style is still inspiring everyday people and fashion designers today. So that was the angle that I was most interested in, sort of looking at what kinds of inspiration can we take from each of them.
Well, the whole way it's presented is fantastic. I mean, it's not much bigger in size than a snapshot photo or an index card. It could easily fit inside a coat pocket for perusing while traveling.
That's right. It's like the analog version of Pinterest.
Very true.
The little guidebook features a photo of nearly 80 stars along with a profile of each star's signature looks and movie roles, as well as style tips, all written and researched by you. How did you handle the daunting task of picking just 79 stars and then narrowing that list down to just 40 that appear on the accompanying deck of cards? There had to have been many painful omissions.
Yeah, that was really difficult because there were so many people that I could include. I definitely wanted to make sure I had a broad range of stars from different eras. So from silent films, I decided to cut it off at around the 1970s so that I didn't go too much further into modern day cinema, but also a broad array of styles as well, and stories. Each star has a different story about fashion, the way they used fashion, and particularly whether it was something very positive for them or if it was a cultural stereotype they had to fight against, or even if it was a revolutionary act, something that they were doing to assert themselves and take up space in a world that was telling them not to take up space. So that was part of my reasoning. I didn't want to have too many stories that were the same, too many looks that were the same. And of course, the whole way through, I wanted to make sure that I was mentioning the costume designers, because when we think of the fashion of movie stars during the golden age of Hollywood, we're really thinking about their costumes and how they looked in movies, which was often the product of the costume designer. Sometimes the star would work with the costume designer. Sometimes, the costume designer was really responsible for creating this persona of the stars. So I wanted to make sure that was mentioned, because unlike today, we can't really see photos of what they looked like in their everyday clothes walking down the street. That didn't exist at the time. So we looked to movies, and so I was exploring how costumes were used and how the stars used those costumes to create their image.
You cover an amazing scope of stars, too, not just the obvious beautiful actresses known for their incredible fashions like Lana Turner, Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Jean Harlow, but also the male stars, actors whom you might find surprising choices at first, but make perfect sense in the looks that they created, inspired, like Cab Calloway or James Dean or Billy D. Williams or Marlon Brando.
Yeah, exactly. And you might not think of Humphrey Bogart as necessarily being a fashion star, but when you think about him and his, fedora pulled low over his face and his trench coat with the collar popped, you instantly know his image, and there's no doubt that he was an icon of the screen. Of course, Cary Grant, very well known for his fashion. Billy D. Williams was called the Black Cary Grant, but he definitely had a style that was all of his own. And then Marlon Brando and James Dean are interesting examples of how fashion changed into the 1950s, and also an example of how the simplest fashions sometimes last the test of time. I think when we think about fashion, we think about taking risks and pushing the boundaries and following trends. But actually what I discovered in writing about all these stars is that it's, the little black dress on Audrey Hepburn, or the well-cut suit on Cary Grant, or James Dean's white t-shirt and jeans. Like, those are the styles that last the test of time and keep being inspirations, even though they are very simple and very classic.
And there are some stars that the mere mention of their name, a look instantly comes to mind. Like you mentioned Humphrey Bogart with his overcoat and fedora, but take Fred Astaire, you think of the top hat, white tie, and tails.
That's right. And Fred Astaire is an interesting one because he was, of course, focusing not only on portraying a character with his clothes, but also working with the costume designer to make sure he could dance in the clothes, to make sure that the clothes moved when he was dancing. I also included Ginger Rogers, his partner. They were on screen many times together, and Fred Astaire was also involved in her costumes too, because he wanted to make sure that the dresses would look good as they moved on screen.
Right, I think there's a famous story that he told once about one of her costumes. Yeah. It weighed so much, and every time he swung around, the sleeve kept hitting him in the face.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a whiplash.
He was getting beat up.
And there was another one where Ginger Rogers insisted on having a dress that was made of blue ostrich feathers, and the feathers would just go flying every time they were dancing. And Fred Astaire would keep singing, "Feathers, I hate feathers."
I'm sure you've seen the That's Entertainment series of films that MGM released back in the 1970s.
Yes.
Out of all the wonderful vintage clips contained in those films, I think in part two my very favorite has to be seeing a 75-year-old Fred Astaire once again donning the top hat, white tie, and tails, and doing this elegant dance with Gene Kelly in one of the newly filmed linking segments. You just can't help but smile seeing that.
I know. He really was the picture of elegance all the way through his life, and was always seen in those beautiful suits and the way he carried himself. I mean, that was all part of his persona, including fashion. Even though people might not necessarily associate him directly with fashion, it was very important to him.
And with someone like Cab Calloway, it's of course the zoot suit look he created, but I suppose you could also say his trademark all-white tuxedo with tails that he performed his signature song Minnie the Moocher in countless times.
Exactly. I mean, again, another iconic image. People might recognize him even if they've never heard his songs or never seen him appear in movies. And the zoot suit is an interesting example of the way fashion could be used as resistance. You know, it was a way for black and brown Americans to assert themselves and say, we're not going to shrink down, we're going to get bigger. The suits got bigger and bolder and louder, and they wanted to stand out. And that was something that Cab Calloway always did on screen. No matter how quick his appearances were, you always remembered him. And that was true also of Lena Horne, who was a singer and actress who was often cut out of films in the South. So they would put her in movies where she could be easily cut out. She just comes on, does a musical number that has nothing to do with the plot of the actual film. But again, she made sure that she just looked beautiful and stunning every time and made an impression so that you would remember her, even if she wasn't even playing a character, was just singing a song.
The glamorous Rita Hayworth certainly created many awe-inspiring looks, but as you mentioned, the standout has to be that classic black strapless dress she wore in Gilda during the Put the Blame on Mame number.
Absolutely, and Rita Hayworth is always interesting to talk about because she did have that image of the sex goddess, and that was helped by her costumes, and particularly that black strapless dress in Gilda, which she wore so well, and that's a very memorable scene, also kind of a sad scene as well, where you see her character just being desperate and trying to grab attention from men. But in her real life, Rita Hayworth was very different. And so, as I mentioned in the guidebook, she preferred very simple clothes when she wasn't on screen. She liked pants, she liked oversized sweaters. She wasn't one in her own life to really show off her body. And so her persona was very different to who she actually was in real life.
Well, I actually have a quick story about that dress from Gilda and what happened to it that I think you'll find interesting. Back in the 2000s, I became acquainted with the former actress Katharine Grant, who in 1957 became Mrs. Bing Crosby. Well, during a visit to my home in 2003, when she was in Milwaukee for a celebration of what would have been Bing's 100th birthday, we were looking through some publicity stills I had from her movie career, and she spotted one of her wearing a black strapless dress. Well, she told me when she was under contract at Columbia in the mid-1950s, the studio brought that very dress that Rita wore in Gilda a decade earlier for her to use for that publicity photo shoot, but that it didn't fit. So the wardrobe department simply altered the dress to Katharine's much smaller frame, and it was used as intended for the photo shoot. So that's why no one has been able to locate that original dress, because it was so heavily altered and reused by Katharine Grant. I guess the studio didn't realize its historical value at the time.
Wow, that's amazing, and that's a great example of how, at the time, people weren't thinking about these costumes as being iconic or something that people would still reference and be inspired by all of these years later. It was very much just for that project and then moved on and sometimes forgotten about.
I'm sure you probably already know that the same thing happened with the famous gold lame dress that Marilyn Monroe wore in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Yes.
It had been worn the previous year by Ginger Rogers.
That's right. A lot of recycling going on.
So that's probably the only instance that two film fashion icons in your new publication both wore the same iconic dress.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's so true. I should have found the pictures side by side to show them both.
When choosing the stars for the book, had you considered Carole Lombard? She's one of my favorite actresses of the 1930s and certainly wore some very glamorous dresses.
Yes, yeah, definitely Carole Lombard. She was up there. And, Ava Gardner. I mean, there were so many of these beautiful actresses of the 30s, 40s, and 50s that I really wanted to include, but then I was like, I just felt like I was repeating myself or felt like I couldn't include everyone, and I had to make some hard cuts. But definitely Carole Lombard, she was on there.
And she certainly had some very glamorous looks in her films, and she actually did a couple of dance films with George Raft in between his gangster roles in the mid-30s.
Right.
I don't think they've ever been shown on TV, but they're certainly interesting films. One's called Bolero, I think, and the other one is Rumba.
Yeah, I've never seen them, but I've heard about them.
Yeah, those would be great if they could ever find those at TCM, because I think just the fashions alone are fantastic.
Exactly.
We're talking with TCM host Alicia Malone on this edition of Nostalgia Radio Time, and so my listeners can see you in action. You are the film host Sunday afternoons and again on Tuesday evenings, plus the host of TCM Imports late Sunday night.
Yeah, that's right. I'm there every Sunday, every Tuesday night, and yes, you have to stay up very late on a Sunday night to watch TCM Imports, or, record it and watch it later. That's fine too.
And you just wrapped up a series this past summer you hosted on Sundays titled Summer Romance, during which you chose some of your favorite romance films, which I very much enjoyed, and that had to have been a labor of love for you, because I know that is one of your very favorite genres of film.
It really is, and that was an idea I pitched to Charlie Tabish, our head of programming. I said, I would really love to show more romance films. I mean, we show a lot on TCM already, but to make it special, make it into a series. And he said, well, how about we do it over summer? The only challenge will be that when you pick the films, you'll also have to pick movies featuring that star for Summer Under the Stars. So he gave me a list of who would be on Sundays and Tuesdays as our featured star during August on Summer Under the Stars, and then I was able to choose romance films based on, them featuring that star. So it was a really fun challenge. Again, had to make difficult cuts when it came to having a list, but I really loved getting to choose those films, and to introduce them was a blast, and I'm hoping it can come back next year. I don't know, I have to talk to Charlie, see what he thinks, if he's sick of romance.
Has there ever been an instance where a film that you've chose simply couldn't be found or couldn't be aired on TCM for copyright reasons or licensing or things of that nature?
Yeah, that happens a lot, and that's the main reason why some films are not on TCM or not shown very often on TCM, or sometimes just not available. The rights just go in and out, and some movies we can always license, and some movies are much harder. So I can't remember the exact titles, but I know I sent a big long list, and then that was the first cut, was like, well, we can't get this one or that one or this one, but we can get this group, so choose from this group.
Do you have any upcoming film series on TCM that you can tell us about, or anyone you'll be interviewing?
Well, later this month in September, I am going to be hosting 2 nights with Luis Reyes, who's an author of Viva Hollywood. You might have even spoken to him on your show. He's going to be talking about Hispanic Heritage Month. So we did one night of Fernando Lamas films, and then another night with the cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa. And that was really fun to do. Plus, toward the end of the year, I don't know what the programming is going to be just yet, or right at the end of the year, the hosts are going to get together again to do a special for New Year's Eve.
Oh, fantastic.
That's always
there was a lot of fun
when
last year.
Get together, all 5 of us.
Yes.
Have you thought about doing a companion film series to the guidebook of film fashion icons?
I know. I really should. I mean, I would love to do that. I guess, we already did a lot of it for Follow the Thread, but I did see last night on TCM they had a night's programming dedicated to Edith Head, and she's a costume designer who kept coming up, obviously. Her name kept coming up as I was writing about all these film stars, because she was so important, and a great example of a skilled costume designer who knew how to enhance a star's image, and also, which body parts to show off and which to hide. And she helped make, Barbara Stanwyck into a glamour girl from her usual roles of playing working women on screen. So it was fun to see that. Ben hosted that night, and that was a good time.
Well, in addition to your work at TCM, you've been hosting a podcast of your own with Tom Myers for HBO's The Official Gilded Age podcast, which must be a lot of fun for you, especially being able to interview the cast.
Yeah, that's right. That's so fun.
Kind of a throwback to your days doing press junkets for film releases.
That's right. It was fun this season. This was the third season that I'd done the podcast with Tom Myers, and he hosts the Bowery Boys podcast, which is all about New York history. So he taught me a lot about New York history during the Gilded Age, and I've learned so much in delving into the true story behind the TV show, but also I got to impart some of my wisdom of what it's like doing a press junket, because we got to go to New York to interview some of the cast at their press junket. So I was talking Tom through, how the day works, what happens, like how much time you get with the stars. We went through our questions so that we could host each one. We could both share the questions and make sure we both got to ask the questions we wanted. And so that was really fun. And we just this season had an embarrassment of riches when it came to interviews, because now all the cast and the crew, they know about the podcast. They really enjoy the podcast. So everyone wanted to be on it. So I think in the end we did about 24 interviews with the cast and crew.
Wow.
But it was great. It was really fun.
So I have to ask, did you get the hugs at the end of the interviews?
I didn't. I stopped doing the hugs, and so I just kind of went, bye. Waved at them as I walked out.
Well, speaking of those days when you're doing the press junkets, did you ever meet a man named Gino Salamone?
Yes, I did.
He's very well known in this area. He actually works for the local Fox 6 news station in Milwaukee for many years now. So we've always seen his movie reviews here in the Milwaukee area.
Yeah, really nice guy. He was one of the people I would see quite often on the junket circuit, and that was another piece that was fun about doing the press junkets, were the reporters that you would see at every press junket. So you kind of got to know everyone. Sometimes we would all travel to do a press junket overseas, and so you just see the same faces. And also funny with the Gilded Age podcast is, so not only did we do a press junket in person in New York, but we also participated in a virtual press junket, which is new since I stopped doing press junkets, where they run it all through Zoom, and you're in this sort of virtual waiting room with all the other reporters before they magically transport you into a Zoom with the star. But just looking around at the waiting room, I was like, oh my gosh, so many familiar faces, so many reporters who are still doing the job, and that was really fun to see the old crowd again.
Well, I've already kept you far too long, so I have one final question. Actually, it's more of an observation that I hope I'm not out of line in bringing up, but when I told a few people about the interview we'd be doing, the one thing they all told me was to tell you that they like that you're going back to your
trademark red hair color again.
Well, I'm glad. I know I thought I wanted to go back to being blonde, which is my original hair color, but then I just missed the red. So now I'm trying sort of like a hybrid, a bit of a strawberry blonde, but a little bit toward the darker red. But no, I'm glad people enjoy it. It kind of, when I got it back, I was like, okay, now I feel like myself again, even though I'm a natural blonde. It seems to suit me.
So does that mean that Red Fury will be making a comeback again, too?
That's right. To watch out. Ben, Dave, and Eddie, Red Fury is coming back.
Well, it's always fun to speak with you, Alicia, and I wanted to
thank you once again for being so generous with your time, and congratulations on your 5th published book. I urge everyone to check out Film Fashion Icons because it makes the perfect gift for the film lover on your list.
I have to ask, are you working on book number 6?
I am.
Oh, good.
I am working on book number 6. I can't say anything about it, but I'm sure we're going to be talking about it.
Oh,
next
fantastic.
Year.
Well, maybe next year we can have you back on again and
I would
talk about that book.
Always nice to talk to you, Greg.
Thank you again, Alicia. Hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
Always a delight to speak with Alicia, and hope you'll check out that book, Film Fashion Icons.
Go, Joe, go!
And the old clock up on the studio wall tells me it's time to close up shop for another week of Nostalgia Radio Time. I'm Greg Van Beek. Thank you for listening, and hope you'll join me again next week for more music and memories of the greatest generation. Feel free to email me with your comments about the program or any song requests, old-time radio show requests. Send them all to nostalgiaradiotime@yahoo.com. And while you're online, check us out on Facebook and X. And for all your antique radio needs, check out my website at radioaddict.com/Van Beek. So until we meet again next week, I'm Greg Van Beek saying so long for now.